Okay, so welcome to the 6th open webinar organized by Századvég Economic Research Institute. As you may know, this is our first in-person meeting, and this event follows our online discussion, which started back in 2021. The previous webinars focused on a wide range of policies, starting from digital skills and digital readiness of microenterprises, companies' behavior on climate policy, deurbanization, European innovation agenda, EU waste policies, and correlated consumer behavior. So if you follow EU policy making, you know that all these are and continue to be very much agenda setting. Today, we will discuss sustainable agri-food systems, specifically dairy markets, and of course, related consumer behavior. As you can imagine, this is an intellectual kink for us to always relate to consumer behavior, not to policy design only. Our discussion, as always, is more targeted at conveying results from a primary research, market understanding and practice, mainly from Central Europe. So the panel, we start off with an introduction of a recent study. Then we will hear from two first-rate members of the panel, one from one of the largest association in the sector, the voice of the milk processing industry. I say, well, the European Dairy Association, and the other panel member, we will listen to hopefully the transparent thinking that is being developed at the Commission, and we will hear from one of the assistants of DG Agri's Director General. Then we will have a round of questions, and we already have a couple of questions from the people coming in who have registered. Obviously, we will touch upon challenges, success stories, and shortcomings. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Now, a little bit of a housekeeping. If you're present, please hold on to your questions until the end of the first part of the discussion. If you're online, and we have a quite nice number of online participants already who have joined the discussion, please use the chat box, and we'll collect the questions, and then we will address them to the people who you're aiming the questions with. The event is recorded and will be made available on the Institute's website. And also the presentation will also be made accessible on the same website. My name is Belényesi, and I will navigate the participants and panelists today. Now, before introducing the event more in detail, I would like to give the opportunity to Kinga, Kenyeres, CEO of Századvég, to briefly welcome the participants. And I will also move, so you can be.
Thank you.
Sure? Okay.
I would like to welcome you here at the webinar, as I mentioned. The webinar is organized by Századvég. What is Századvég? As you know, maybe or not, Századvég was founded 30 years ago as a political and economic think tank in Hungary. As part of the Századvég Group is the Századvég Economic Research or Századvég Konjunktúrakutató, which is a research and consulting company providing services for public and private sector clients, mainly in Hungary, but we have some clients from other. So we strongly rely on data collection, primary data collection. That's why we have our own research center in the company, our company. Dávid is calling from the research center at the Századvég, and we believe that a sound professional advice can be formulated only with primary data analysis. That's why at the Századvég, this primary research branch is very, very strong. And we believe that our research and our results are interesting for not for Hungarian stakeholders and partners, but from it can be interesting at European level too. And I think this fact is shown by the fact that this is our sixth. I would like to wish you a very meaningful and thoughtful discussion with our panelists, with our distinguished guests. And please,
thank you. So before giving the opportunity to Századvég to introduce the study, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background to set sort of the scene about the dairy sector that is the focal point of our discussion. In the EU, as you may know, and all those joining us online, the dairy sector is the second biggest agricultural sector, responsible for about 12 to 15% of total agricultural output. As part of the Common Agricultural Policy, the EU's dairy policy consists of a range of instruments designed to support farmers and to address market imbalances. Now, if you look at the EU as a total, the EU is the largest dairy milk production region in the world. In 2021, the combined markets of the EU 27 produced approximately 145 million metric tons of dairy products. That's a humongous amount of dairy products. That being said, Hungary's total milk production has declined since it joined the European Union, so the past 20 years, probably not independently. 25 to 40% price drop of raw milk has also occurred after the quotas were abolished in 2015. The dairy segment, like many others, has been hit by raising energy prices, inflation, and also, of course, the lack of human resource, as we will hear about it in the study. Now, we are here to talk about sustainability to some extent, and the sustainability as the concept has scooped into the sector, and not only for environmental purposes, but also because of competitiveness, in particular through a more efficient resource management. When I was preparing to give you the introduction, I looked at a couple of recent studies and noticed that consumers tend to look at companies' green strategies more and more so. And this is also, of course, this is true in general, but when it comes to the dairy sector, consumers start to realize the importance of the product's content, packaging, presentation, and also beyond when making decisions. At least so the legislators think. But what we are also looking at today, is this really the case? Now, I found that a recent study looking at a small country in Eastern Europe found that the most important factor when consumers choose dairy products are quality, safety, and prices only at the third place. I believe that we will have something different when it comes to Hungary. And not only in Eastern Europe, but in India. A study from 2020 found that the most important factors when consumers choose dairy products are quality, health, healthiness of the product, and then only price. So I think we will have an interesting learning from Századvég. The research of which is about to present, which we are about to see, examines the full supply chain, right? So what I dubbed as the triangle of dairy markets, the relationship between producers, processors, and supermarkets or traders. So through the focus of primary data gathering, which was, of course, limited to Hungary, we will have a better understanding of the dairy markets they're in, though I believe that the learnings and the implications are probably going beyond the markets. So with that, I would like to give the opportunity to Dávid Kollár, who is a senior researcher at Századvég, to present the study.
Thank you very much. welcome to everyone in person or online. Is this working?
No, I
okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, the technical setup. In the next few minutes, I will talk about research which was conducted in late 2022. Its primary aim was to examine in detail the situation of the dairy sector in Hungary and to identify possible problem areas as well. Live with this, the title of my presentation is Dairy Market. Okay. Before presenting the concrete results, I would like to say a few words in corresponding file about why this topic is particularly important. As the Hungarian and international literature clearly states, the drive to build and support sustainable supply chains is becoming increasingly important in 21st century economies and societies. This can be seen in policy goals set at global, EU, and local level, but also in the changes in the citizens' value preferences, as shown by various international surveys, academic papers, and so on. The development of sustainable supply chains, of course, contributes to the environmental protection on one hand, and on the competitiveness of companies through more efficient resource management and cost reduction on the other. In line with this, more analyses aim to explore the sustainability of the supply chain, identify trends, highlight problem areas. So, can you please? A couple of words about the methodology. The research used several different methods to get a more comprehensive picture on the situation. First, in order to analyze the situation, to describe the field, to identify trends, we use several different national and international databases, and we also reviewed the relevant literature of the Hungarian theories. Secondly, a questionnaire survey was conducted in which 53 randomly selected companies were interviewed using computer-assisted web interviewing method. Thirdly, 20 semi-structured interviews were conducted with producers, processors, traders, stakeholders, and representatives. Let's talk about the results. The data show that over the past few years, both in producer and processor segments, sales have typically increased. As you can see here, the figures, 33 respondents answered, they experienced increase in terms of value and 25 in terms of quantity. If we turn to the processor sector, 6 experienced increase in terms of value and 6 in terms of quantity as well. So these results are confirmed by the time series microdata provided by the Hungarian Statistical. Between 2010 and 2021, the volume of cow's milk production has basically on an upward trend. The average annual increase was 35 million liters. So, of course, we also look at other factors. For example, which the sector is characterized by overproduction. The data show that overproduction only occurs in a few cases. In the producer sector, only 4 representatives mentioned that their company had ever experienced overproduction. 41 that said they had not. They had never experienced it. In the processor sector, 7 experienced no overproduction and 3 experienced overproduction. It's also worth noting that when overproduction does occur, it's also typically rare. It's occurred only every few years. And it's also important to underline that overproduction is only a problem for smaller companies with insufficient storage capacity. In addition to overproduction, other factors, including product shortages, were also explored in the research. The data for the producer sector showed that 24 of the respondents had not experienced any product shortages. 5 respondents had experienced product shortages in products manufactured by the company, 9 in processed materials, and 3 respondents had experienced product shortages in both cases. In the case of processing subsample, most respondents indicated that they had not experienced any, but 3 reported they had experienced product shortages, and this was for products manufactured by the firm. and one was from both, and one from was processed products. So it's important to note here again that the vast majority of the respondents, both in the producing and processing sector, had experienced product shortages only very rarely and every few years. So all these results suggest that the sales of products between different actors in the supply chain are basically successful. In other words, the products needed for manufacturing are typically available, and the manufactured products are sold. So, although these results suggest that the different levels of the dairy supply chain is well coordinated, this is considerably nuanced by the interviews. Producers who participated in the research suggest that the unit price of the commodity to be sold is set by the processors. Here, producers perceive that they are at the mercy of the processing sector. As one of our interviewees said, it is not uncommon for the processors in the better bargaining position to modify the contract on its own initiative, creating obstacles for producers. The situation, and it's interesting, is similar for processors who perceive an asymmetrical relationship with the commercial sector. And it's important to note that this is to a large extent orientated by consumer preferences. The Hungarian data show, opposing to what Paul said, that the price of the dairy products is the most important aspect for the consumers. So overall, producers are at the service of processors, and processors are at the service of retailers, and this weakens the market position of producers and processors as well. The effective functioning of the sector, of course, is not only hampered by a conflict of interest between different actors. The results show that the lack of adequate human resource is one of the main obstacles to the functioning of the dairy sector. The lack of skilled labor makes it difficult for companies to find employees to coordinate specific work processes, but there is also a fear of lack of replacement as the necessary trainings have disappeared. According to our interviewees, if the dairy sector is not able to develop a young generation to take over the jobs of the current generation, Hungary will weaken in the international dairy market, and its ability to supply itself with these consumables will be in danger. The positions that are on the brink of aging and extinction are those that require deep theoretical and practical knowledge, and accordingly, several years of systemic training. To this end, the creation, the establishment of dairy training courses is considered especially important. Another serious problem for the dairy market is the energy crisis and the high inflation. According to interviewees, the significant increase in gas and electricity bills is making it difficult for many businesses to operate. These problems are also confirmed by the survey in the processing sector, which shows that 8 out of the 10 respondents see the increase in energy prices as a major problem. Similar trends can be registered for inflation and the labor wages. And 6 out of the 10 respondents stated that labor shortages have a significant or major impact on dairy production. However, these results are positively influenced by the fact that nearly 2/3 of the surveyed companies plan to make improvements in the next 2-3 years. While investments in infrastructure and energy efficiency are the highest priority for the producer sector, technological improvements are the most frequently mentioned by representatives of the processing sector. Explore potential development areas in more detail. We also ask for specific development areas. The results show that decision makers in the production segment see a need to improve the quality of bulk feed production, but would also welcome improvements in husbandry and milking technologies, technological improvements in feed technology, and focus on animal health. Potential developments in the processing sector were also examined. one. It can be said that the three most positively received development directions are encouraging innovation, promoting investments in logistics, and supporting digital solutions. Okay, thank you very much. So, summing up this main finding, our analysis of the Hungarian dairy sector show a generally efficient supply chain with rising sales, rare product shortages, and rare overproduction. However, smaller companies can struggle with overproduction due to insufficient storage capacities. Notably, that there is a perceived asymmetry among the stakeholders. Producers feel vulnerable to processors and processors to traders, and it indicates a potential power imbalance in the chain. This situation, along with the high consumer focus on product prices, can weaken the market position of producers and processors. Other significant challenges include a shortage of skilled labor, difficulties due to the energy crisis. Despite these issues, 2/3 of the surveyed businesses plan developments within the next 2-3 years, focusing mainly on infrastructure, energy efficiency, and technology. On the basis of these findings and suggestions explicitly made by the interviewees, the following recommendations were formulated. So the first one is the balancing the unequal relationship between producers and processors. As there is an unequal relationship between producers and processors, the formulation of dairy producer associations, clusters, or organizations would significantly increase the bargaining power of the downstream actors in the supply chain. Secondly, addressing labor shortage. There is a need to organize training courses, especially in the field of dairy industry, on the level of vocational training or higher, even with state school. Third, dealing with the energy crisis. Addressing the energy crisis by promoting energy efficiency improvements and the shift to renewable energy sources. And finally, providing support for SMEs for infrastructure development. When it comes to future opportunities, all our interviewees mentioned tenders as almost the first. These tenders are seen as useful mainly in the area of improving equipment so that production and processing can be optimized and more and better quality dairy products can be produced. The main problem with these tenders is that the small producers and processors lack the capacity to monitor these funds on an ongoing basis. And there are also significant financial barriers to compliance with the criteria. So it would therefore be important to advertise well-targeted tenders for smaller producers and processors as well. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that brief introduction. You really kept the time limit. And given that you've already presented us with recommendations, there's very little left for me to say, but the next person that I'd like to contribute to this discussion is Alexander Anton from the European Dairy Association, or perhaps better known as Euromilk. Alexander has been the Secretary General of Euromilk for almost 10 years, just under 10 years as I checked, and he's a very modest person, but he's been in the industry for 20 years. Already I saw that you've guided the German association for a couple of years in the early 2000s. And obviously he has a massive understanding of the sector, and we have discussed the subject matter before and when we're preparing for this meeting, and he told me that the Hungarian sector is somewhat missing from the organization that he's residing. And on the one hand, I would like to hear from him what he thinks of the study and present us with his reflections from perhaps a more of a EU association, non-Eastern European point of view. Please.
Köszönöm. setting up that meeting, and I do apologize up front. I will pronounce some names in a terrible way because I'm not speaking English. So first of all, a huge kudos to the organization Századvég and the CEO, Kinga, you are here. So thank you so much, because what you do here, you bring the Hungarian dairy to a Brussels pub. And I'm in the dairy. I mean, I had other stations in my career, but I'm in the dairy for 20 years. And I have to admit, the Hungarian lactosphere is still a black box for me. And that's why I really appreciate David, the excellent study you presented. And I scribbled down a few comments, not very structured. You are an analytic guy, I'm not. So that will not be. And I'm humbled to be here in that panel with Bence, David, Paul, and there are people in the audience. Gabor from Peter Bonke's team, Andrea Bocella-Chapovichkova, Michaeli Imic from the European Commission, that would most probably know a lot, not only most, but a lot more about the Hungarian lactosphere than myself. So I'm really humbled to be here. The main conclusion of your, for me, the main conclusion of your study, by the way, we are representing indeed 30 dairy associations across the Union. Hungary is one of the missing countries. Bulgaria, Romania is missing, Malta, Cyprus, a few are missing. And we have, I'm proud to have the United Kingdom in my membership, and Georgia, another country where 25% of the territory is occupied by the Russian aggressors, and we are in good terms in a pre-membership with our colleagues from Ukraine. Now, the positive message, that I can't help, I have a positive view on milk and dairy. The positive message here, we did get that. 2/3 of the people involved in Hungarian dairy are thinking about future investments in the next 2 to 3 years. There's a dynamic here. The dynamic is underlined also. You have attracted international capital in the Hungarian lactosphere dairy sector, or lactosphere, sorry. You have Savencia, Friesland, Campina, heavy investments over the last few years, active in Hungary, collecting milk, processing milk, and selling milk. And wherever you go in the European Union, if ever you go to a fast food restaurant, I don't recommend it, but wherever you go and you have a fast food with a breaded cheese, the chances are very high that that cheese is coming from Hungary, right? So I was a bit, not shocked, but a bit surprised to see overproduction on one of your slides. What is overproduction? Andrea, tell me, what is overproduction? Right? We have sometimes a cyclical behavior of the dairy markets, an overproduction. Well, in Hungary, you produce 109% of your national dairy needs. Yeah. So from a mathematical structure, I could say you have 9% overproduction, which is nonsense, because you are exporting 45% of your milk. 45% of your milk, Hungarian milk, is enjoyed outside of Hungary. It's not 9%, it's not 109, no, it's 45%. Of the Hungarian milk volume that are enjoyed outside the Hungarian borders. And that is not really linked to the 5 million Hungarians living abroad. This is normal markets. On the other hand, yes, you import 40% of the milk volumes you enjoy in Hungary, mostly cheese. That's what we call single market. That's what the union is known for. That's great. So the word overproduction, I would have my doubts. I didn't understand the concept of it, but that is my intellectual limitation and not your fault. That's very clear. And then you say you said rightly that dairy is the second biggest agricultural sector in the European Union. You say that. And then the important point here is animal agriculture is something else than crops. When you say animal agriculture, you have a lot more of jobs created by turnover than in crops. It's labor intensive. That's your next point. Generational renewal, lack of labor. That is more than true. And if you look at one of your slides, you say, well, the problems, if you take out the temporary problems, inflation and high energy prices, which we will hope thanks to the European Commission, we will overcome. Just preparing your speech. Then if you correct that slide with all these temporary, momentous problems, The biggest one is lack of personnel generation of immigrants.
Exactly.
And they have the good news for Hungary, you're not alone. That is something where we really suffer. We have seen quite big European operators who had to stop the operations on Sundays because people don't sign a working contract with you if you tell them you have to work on Sundays. And even if it's only every second month, people don't accept that. I wouldn't, by the way. So that was a lack of personnel generational renewal there. We are in, and we don't know really how to tackle that. There's agri-bashing going on. As a farmer, you don't have the recognition. Very happy to see that what happened a few weeks ago in the Netherlands is now translating in European politics, that farmers are more and more backed by European politics. You see one of the major parties in the European Parliament deciding on the New Deal, Farmers Deal, a new Farmers Deal, and really highlighting the role of farming and the farmers in society. So we will get there, but it takes time and we don't have a lot of time. And then we were talking about feed. I don't leave that to you. I know that you would make the point. I guess you would make the point, but you are not allowed. You're from the Commission. I can't do that. I mean, if I see on a slide that the Hungarian dairy community complains about a lack of quality feed, by the way, which is true, how can we see that? If I see the average protein and fat content in Hungarian milk, you have the low end, Why that? Because of the feed, of course. But at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, Hungary blocked somehow some grain imports from Ukraine. Well, that doesn't match really together, but that's politics, none of my business. Now, when it comes to the feed side, we talked indeed to UBM, the big Hungarian feed mill, and Cargill, Agri-Firm, Nutrico, you name it. And yes, they are focused, for historical reasons, right, on pork and poultry. They are not really focused on dairy so far, but that will change. So there is a change ongoing at feed mill level. And then we talked about the vulnerability of producers. And yes, dairy producers are vulnerable. Weather conditions are the first vulnerability, right? Weather conditions, international markets. And then we were talking about producers being at the mercy of processors and processors at the mercies of retailer and trade. I wouldn't use that language, but I know what you mean. There we have the European Commission, the Milk Package 2012, where you have Article 148 and following, where we have this possibility of setting up producers' organizations and interbranch organizations. And by the way, that's worth looking into from a Hungarian dairy milk producing perspective, because there's a wide range of different systems of producer organizations. And my favorite one is from my home Bavaria, that is really working, co-financed by the dairy industry, it's really working. So the contractual relationships producer organization, that's all since 2012, basically up to the member states to decide the contractual relationship between processors and the farmers and the setting up of producer organizations. That makes all of the point of the perceived asymmetrics, which is true, which is changing, by the way. Milk is searched after. Milk price is getting corrected, but we had in January 2023 the highest milk price ever in Europe for average, which is 55 euro cents. Even in average. We went to 72 euro cents in some areas of Europe. Milk is searched after. We've seen right now a correction. Doesn't mean anything is overproduction. We see a correction. And then on the Hungarian dairy, as I said, it's a black box for me. What I notice is the structure of the farming sector is quite unique. Rather big farms, more than 300 cows. So if you want to compare the lactose-free milk producing level, it would be Estonia. It would be closest to your structures. And then you don't have cooperative dairies. You don't have cooperative dairies. For historical reasons, like in the Czech Republic, you don't have cooperative dairies. And there, I feel that the balance, that could be an adjustment between of a balance between the farming sector and the processing sector, could be the way for cooperatives. Voila, that is on your study. But again, the main point is the dynamics in the market. You said there is an increase in dairy production, and there's still. I mean, if I tend to compare Hungary, I mean, I know the Polish lactosphere quite well for several reasons. One of which being they are active in Brussels. Once a year, we have a big event from the Polish lactosphere in Brussels. And they joined the European Union together with you. And there is another dynamic in the market. Let's face it. There is another dynamic. They are on another level than what we've seen in the development in Hungary. Then, voila, so that's on your study. If I may, no critics, excellent study. Like always, if you have a Századvég study, it's always close to perfect or perfect, better than whatever I could. Now, and when I say, and when you talked about overproduction, 5 more minutes? Oh, yeah. 5 more minutes? No, 5 more minutes? Go on. I mean, if you look at the Rabobank, the biggest, one of the biggest finances of the agricultural sector in the world, 4 weeks ago, I met with the head of the dairy research in Rabobank, Mary Ledman, and her question was not about overproduction. Her question was where will the milk come from in 2030? And her analysis, and I mean, they analyzed the outlook from the European Commission, where will milk come from? Not the problem, the reality, and that's academics, the methodology of the European Commission does not allow to integrate facts that are not yet in the official, or laws that are not yet in the official journal. That way. So we had that issue with the Brexit. We couldn't have an outlook on the world after Brexit because it was not yet signed. And now we have the same kind of setup with the Farm to Fork strategy, with all the legislative initiatives, more than 120 that are in the making for dairy, of essential importance for dairy, which cannot be integrated for good reason in the methodology of the DG Agri outlook for milk and dairy, which is completely normal. That's what it is. And what the Rabobank outlook is, we will have at least 4 million tons. We have 148 tons right now. We will have 4 million tons less milk in Europe by 2030. And we will miss out at global level 20 to 30 million tons. So the question really is, where will the milk come from? So it's time for the Hungarian dairy industry, dairy sector to ramp up the efforts and to get back to producing more. And then just 2 words, but that's really at my heart on the Farm to Fork review, if I may use that opportunity. Not the issue of the talk today, but 25% of organic production by 2030, political objective. I can tell you, Hungary is the country that is the most far away from that. In dairy, you have 1,000, not even 1,000 dairy cows that are organic dairy cows. 0.2% of your milk production is organic, so that doesn't fly. If we talk the other quality schemes, by the way, like the protected, not protected dairy generation, AOP, the GIs, protected geographical indications, where Italy, France, Spain, they have all their cheeses protected with a quality logo from the European Commission. Hungary has 2, which I can't even pronounce. I think I never ate. So Hungary has only 2, and that only popped up in 2020, 2022. But although there's a label, because you have the quality of products you can deliver. Now, a Green Deal Farm to Fork, you know the figures, 50% of pesticide reduction, 20% of fertilizer reduction. You heard about the industrial emissions directive, all fine. What we see is in the Farm to Fork strategy, it's written out. We have to move to a more plant-based diet. That's not for cows, that's for human beings. We have to move to a more plant-based diet. And I use that opportunity to express my extreme gratitude to your colleagues in DG Agri, because the first drafts we have seen were more expressive than that. So no critics to DG Agri, don't get that wrong. And we see that guiding line moving to a more plant-based diet in each and every legislative proposal. Right? Is it marketing standards? We see that the Commission has stopped. They stopped for dairy. They stopped. They came to us that we have to integrate sustainability criteria in the marketing standard. The marketing standard is a trade standard based on Codex Alimentarius, so global level. And then and they want to integrate sustainability standards. And one example was make butter more healthy, reduce the fat content. That doesn't really, that doesn't really make. But that's for dairy. I think we are good. We're done, and the proposal from the Commission is now really brilliant. What else do we have? School milk scheme, where all of a sudden there is a movement to include alternative drinks into the school milk scheme. Which is, and the last point I want to raise, if I may, is of course the food labeling. Because I know Gabor is here from the permanent representation. He's working on that. Food labeling, national origin labeling, obligatory, mandatory origin labeling of milk and milk products. That is exactly the contrary to single market. And remember, 45% of new milk, the Hungarian milk, is enjoyed outside of the borders, the national territory. Mandatory national origin labeling is completely outside the remit of the idea of the European Union. We haven't seen a proposal yet from the Commission, but we have 10 member states that have 9 that implemented already at national level. Even if the Court of Justice clearly said to the French, it's a no-go, you can't do that. And Gabor, don't smile, because the first were the Hungarians in 2014, but you stopped the process because you've seen obligatory, mandatory national origin labeling is not compatible with the European single market. And you've seen that putting that on a voluntary basis on the products with very strict rules for voluntary labeling is the way to go. So a huge question to the Hungarians for that. And the last one is front of pack nutrition labeling. We wait for that's also in the Green Deal. By the way, origin labeling is sold by the European Commission under the Farm to Fork strategy as under the environmental objectives. And there's not one, and that would be a next study of you, David. There's not one academic study proving that any kind of national origin labeling would have any environmental benefit. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm living in Lille, France, and I'm drinking the milk of Brittany farms, that is 600 kilometers away, and I have a beautiful Belgian dairy just next to Lille, Solarec, which is 40 kilometers away. So that doesn't make sense, by the way. And front of pack nutrition labeling, last point, because you are there. Frankly, having a scheme that does only integrate negative nutrients and doesn't allow to make the case for the unique micro and macronutritional blend of milk. And you said quality health is important for consumers. If consumers, the most prominent front of pack nutrition labeling scheme that is on the market right now, that's called a Nutri-Score. With that Nutri-Score, 85% of all cheeses, Hungarian, French, Polish, does make a difference. 85% of all cheeses will get a red D, like delicious. And that has an impact on the behavior, short and long term. And if people say I doubt, but I trust your studies, that quality, health, price, that is the order of thinking.
Not in Hungary, though. In Hungary,
no, nowhere, but he's nowhere. And I love that one in your study when they said Hungarians prefer Hungarian products, origin labeling, as long as they are cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's in then for her? And by the way, to the Commission, the national origin labeling mandatory that is implemented in France. In France, they had a milk price 12-15 cents lower than in Germany, but we don't have that. So, voilà. Now, front of pack nutrition labeling, last point, and I'm done. So if you tell the consumer that cheese, and 85% of all cheese would have a D, is red, is not good for you, not healthy for you, they will make, quote, a healthy choice, and they will refrain from eating cheese. And that is something, calcium, B12, all the micronutrient that you lose, and nobody, even not me as a as a dairy industry lobbyist, would tell you the whole camembert or 250 grams of Emmental or whatever. But if you that is a study, maybe you should get in touch later on, how that will influence the consumer behavior. That was long, I do apologize, and I'm really humbled. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Alexander. I really like when there's a lot of plenty of information is poured out and there's food for thought for everybody and also for Bence. If he hadn't prepared now, he had the time to prepare and also the munition for that. Based on what Alexander said on the European school scheme, I also wanted to add something maybe later on, but now I take the opportunity to add that, of course, that scheme prefers local and organic products as well, not only what you mentioned, and it's somewhat supported by the German wing in the European Parliament, if I'm not mistaken, which proposes to promote or proposes and promote the sustainable and local agri-food sector. So what, if I can ask a question, so in 3 or 4 sentences, just reflecting on what you said, and I will count them. So where do you think the future of the dairy sector really is? Because what we also see, you mentioned in several contexts, that there is a suggestion, requirement, trend in going towards more plant-based diets. And I wouldn't, completely disregard the fact that having a D on a camembert is not promoting something else that is plant-based at the same time. So there is this marketing behind it. With this promoting local food, but then there is the problem of the single market and the origin of geographical indicators and whatnot. And I agree, it's much more sustainable to get a milk in Normandy from Lille than from Burgundy or whatever the other parts which are further away. But are those really hindering the consumers in Lille in particular, which is just across the border, to get Belgian products? Or is that something else? So with that in mind, in 4 sentences, where do you think that the future of within the EU, and I'm talking about EU inside consumption, right? Not Hungary, France, Germany inside the EU in consumption of dairy products. So where is that going with this plant-based ideas at the same time?
So first of all, if you go to Lille, in any supermarket, you will not find any non-French dairy product, drinking milk, for instance. You will not find that. Right? While in Germany, I've been last week in Germany, and I'm happy to see that there is Polish drinking milk in the German supermarket shops. And that's clearly marked in black bowl, and people buy it. It was not the most expensive choice, I have to admit, but in Lille, the retail sector asymmetrics between the powers in the market, there is no market. That's first thing. On the plant-based, we have the experience with a product which did eat some of a market portfolio, but which is completely respecting the rules. They call margarine. Plant-based, it's not butter, it's margarine. And nobody in the dairy industry has had ever the idea to sell butter as animal-based margarine. And what we want, we don't want to blur the lines. If you have a veggie, plant-based product, I'm proud of it. There is ample space in the market. We've seen that there is a development. There's no problem. If consumers want to have an oat drink or a soy drink, it's on the market. That's like margarine and butter. There's a fair competition. That's fine. What we don't like is if they hijack the image of the dairy product. If you call something a yogurt where there is no milk, because in the perception of a consumer, a yogurt is a dairy product, there must be milk in, and that's what we want. And with that in mind, if they play to the rules, if we have the protection of dairy terms, again, looking to you, protection of dairy terms, you can't call something, you're not allowed to call something a yogurt which is not made out of milk. You can't call something milk which is not milk. That's based also on Codex rule. That's the reality. As long as they play to the rules, we're fine. We're fine. That's a market that's developing. There is a clientele, and the best news is we know that there's a big I'm not a macho, but there is a bigger share of women tending to these kind of products. And we know from market research, they come back to dairy as soon as they have a family. They come back to dairy as soon as they have a family. It's the case.
So is that so do you see the future of the dairy market as more of a defensive position, as defending of what we have, like yogurts, or am I reading too much into that?
No. I mean, we are not defending. I mean, we are in the offensive. People enjoy dairy because they know it's good, it tastes good, it's quality, and it's natural. And voila. And that is what is dairy in the consumer's mind. If you have all the consumer research done, then people don't link a dairy product, cheese, a yogurt, they link it to pleasure, to nutrition, to health. They don't link it to the biggest extent. They don't link it to whatever other people want to have it linked to, like animal welfare, being overweight, being whatever, environmental reasons. They don't link to that. And that's the treasure of dairy is recognized by the people.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And of course, I'm being provocated to some extent with that. I would like to give the floor now to Bence Tóth, who is one of the assistants, as I mentioned, at DG Agri, is Director General. And he has been working at the Commission for almost 20 years. I checked yesterday, and you started 3 months after I have started, like 20 years ago, which also gives you an idea of that we are colleagues and peers. And he's been deputizing the evaluations and studies unit in DG Agri for some time. And before that, has been a member of the UK task force, TF50, of the European Commission during the Brexit negotiations. We've known each other for almost the entire time that he's been at the Commission. Bence, you have a lot to reflect on, both the study and Alexander has given you some ideas and questions. So please take your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to Századvég for organizing this very nice, prestigious event. I express my gratitude for being here in the panel among really distinguished colleagues. I remain humble. I used to be a semi-expert in the dairy field back in 2005 to 2010. And then they came even better colleagues after me, some of who are sitting in the audience. So if I run into difficulties, I'm going to reach out to you, Ander and Mihai, so be prepared. No, so thank you again. There's a lot to reflect on. Alexander called me out a few times, refused the Commission, which is fine and which is correct, because we are living, I would say, very interesting, challenging times. When I joined the Commission and I was working on the dairy sector, this was back in 2003, 2005, I was involved in the medium-term market projections, which Ander and Mihai are doing right now. And I remember when we were looking at the assumptions underlying the agricultural sector in general, but the dairy sector in particular, we were looking at what's happening in terms of trade agreements, what's happening in terms of general macroeconomic developments. These were the main thrusts of what was determining basically externally the evolution of the agricultural sector. Fast forward to 2023, we have trade, we have macro, we have climate, environment, consumer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, the sector has changed and the world has changed. We have basically, as DG Agri and agricultural policy, a much more limited actual impact and influence on the agricultural sector as such, as we had in the past, which is very interesting from a policymaking perspective. And I think this shows very well in the current discussions, debates with respect to the Green Deal, where basically you mentioned quite a number of legislative proposals which are in the pipeline under the current college, which are part of the Green Deal, Farm to Fork, biodiversity strategy, etc., of which I would say not a single one is being developed by DG Agri as the policy DG. So it's quite remarkable that the future of agriculture, in a large way, is being determined by other policy areas. So this is a very novel development. It's a very challenging development because from our side, when we look at sustainability as a concept, we have three dimensions to that, not just environmental. We have the economic and the territorial side of sustainability along with the environmental, which as an agricultural policy, we need to reflect on. So here, of course, what is important, and I'm sure that you're all well aware, back in the beginning of this year, we have the start of a new common agricultural policy, where basically the main novelty, one of the main novelties, is that the policy is based on CAP strategic plans developed by each individual member state and the two regions for Belgium. So we have 28 CAP strategic plans, where basically the member states have a lot of leeway in terms of determining their path of how they want to implement the policy. Of course, there are some benchmarks that they need to reflect. So when it comes to environment, 25% of the direct payments have to go to eco schemes, 35% of second pillar, so-called second pillar rural development payments need to go to climate, environment, biodiversity, etc. But basically, within a general framework, member states have a lot of independence to determine the path they want to go. This is, I think, particularly important in the case of Hungary, along with other member states, because they have the opportunity to look at these challenges, which were presented, look at the recommendations, at least some, and tailor the policy in a way which would cater for the specific needs of the country and the individual sectors. I apologize because I'm not familiar with the Hungarian CAP strategic plan, so I cannot give you an overview on, for instance, what share of payments go to young farmers, what share goes to investments. But basically, the bottom line is in terms of policy making, under the current CAP strategic plans, there is a good chance for the Hungarian, let's say, government to establish a way forward which addresses the problems. Knowing that your assessment came out just now and the Hungarian CAP strategic plan is already being implemented, the good news is that it's possible to amend the CAP strategic plan. So I hope that your study will go into the right hands and it will raise interest and maybe lead to changes. Beyond the CAP, when we look at the ongoing proposals under Green Deal, I have to say it's not straightforward. There are a lot of, as you are most likely well aware, a lot of heated debates. Just the past day, you had Executive Vice President Timmermans in Comagri in the European Parliament, and he had a tough time because since the Green Deal was put down on the table at the beginning of this college, where there was a lot of emphasis, and I have to say rightly so, on the need to go into a green transition, things have changed. So we had the situation in Ukraine, Russian invasion and war, and basically in the wake of it, a lot of economic turmoil, implications on food security. In the EU, it's not really considered an issue. However, I think the affordability part of food security is quite there. If we look at inflation, food inflation in particular, where in Hungary, it has reached incredible levels. So I think the EU average was around 25%, while in Hungary, it reached almost 50% back in December. Now it's going down. So it's quite remarkable. And of course, this has an implication on, especially on the lower income threshold households. So even in the EU, there is an issue with respect to food security. Globally, given the problems with the exports of Ukraine, there are also issues. We have seen now the latest, I think it's an FAO report, which showed that the global population risk to food insecurity reached over 350 million from 200 million the last time they assessed it. So there is a big problem. And given that, now the political discussion when it comes to sustainability has shifted a bit. So there are some political parties, notably the EPP, which have realized that something needs to be done to make sure that the green transition does not go to the detriment of food security. So this is something which the EPP is very vocal about it. We in the Commission, we have made what was basically launched as a study. It was announced when the sustainable use of pesticide and the natural restoration law proposals were tabled by Commissioner Timmermans, that we will do a study assessing the drivers of food security. So basically, it was a very interesting exercise. I think it showed that the Commission, the different services of the Commission, a lot of DGs, as you can imagine, were involved. We put our heads together. We basically put our evidence, facts together, and with the coordination of the JRC, prepared this staff working document on the main drivers of food security, which was published at the beginning of this year. I'm making a long, route coming to what I'm trying to say, is that basically what is clear is that in transition to sustainable, environmentally sustainable future is a must. It's something that we have to embark on. There's no question about it. However, where we need to be very cautious is that we need to distinguish between short-term implications and long-term implications. When we devise policies, we need to be very careful that the ambition is matched with pragmatism. So we don't go into a situation where we basically go headfirst into big changes that have detrimental short-term implications, which we didn't perceive or conceive 2-3 years ago. That's something which is always very interesting in the case of agriculture. I think there hasn't been 1 year since I'm working in this area that there was not a crisis or a challenge. There's always something, and there are a lot of sort of predictable uncertainties, but there are a lot of black swans which come up every now and then, for which you cannot simply not prepare. So as a policymaker, you need to keep that in mind. That okay, we see the direction, we know where we want to go, where we have to go, but the policies should be, let's say, flexible enough that we go in a direction and in the trajectory which basically manages to cater for short-term challenges. So this is something which is very important. This is these are the conclusions of this staff working document, among a lot of other conclusions. But this is something that needs to be kept in mind. And now, in terms of Green Deal, there is a lot of discussion on number of policy proposals in the Parliament, in the Council as well. And we hope, also from DG Agri, we're giving our own views and analysis, that the overall situation would be a good one, that we can indeed embark on the green transition, but in a way which doesn't go to the detriment of the economic, territorial sustainability of EU agriculture and also food security globally. Our commissioner likes to refer to 4 S's that the future common agricultural policy and agriculture needs to provide for. So stability, security, sustainability, and the last one, it slipped my tongue now, but it's solidarity. Solely solidarity. So basically, security for the farm sector, stability of markets, sustainability environmentally, and solidarity on the global stage, providing for food security, etc. So this is very important. Going back a bit to the findings of Századvég, I just have a few remarks and comments. So my understanding is that the survey looked at a longer time horizon.
It was a one-time survey, but there were questions.
Okay. Because it's basically just a question or an observation is that indeed what also Alexander was referring to as hopefully temporary, let's say, glitches in the system linked to the macroeconomic and price situation. So I was wondering whether you have a bit of like recency bias in the findings, because that's yeah, because on the other hand, I also like the let's say the positive overall outcome, increased investments over the next couple of years, which I think coincides also with our outlook that we produce, which is, I think ever since I have been around, the outlook for dairy was always positive, which is, I mean, driven by consumption, global consumption. So the question is, how can we, as EU and as Hungary, capitalize on this? And then, rightly so, some of the environmental sustainability initiatives, like we see in the Netherlands now, which was basically leading to political change, actually, so quite drastic change. It does lead to a lowering of production potential. So the question here is, what can we do to address the environmental objectives without a detriment to the farming sector and to productivity? So this is something that is referred to as sustainable productivity. This is something that we must strive to attain in the future. On that, there are a lot of possibilities. So in terms of what the commercial policy can provide, so there's a lot of investment support that can be done. But of course, what is important is that there is sufficient financing of research and innovation. So there, under Horizon Europe, if I'm correct, there's 9 billion euros for the period until 2027 to look at research in the domain of agriculture, nature, bioeconomy, etc. So it's important that Europe becomes, let's say, at the forefront of innovation and research when it comes to agriculture. One positive sign is that in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, over the past 2 decades, this is over agriculture, so not just dairy in particular, but overall, greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture has declined quite considerably up until like a decade ago, and then it became stable. However, at the same time, productivity has been increasing constantly, which is a good sign, meaning that there is a potential to produce more with less emissions. So this is something where not everything is all doom and gloom, but indeed there will be most likely a price to pay. The price to pay is transition. And the question is, how do we transition? I'm coming back to this. One final point, just with respect to skills and generational renewal. So this is also something which the agricultural policy strives to address. There is one of the specific objectives of the policy is indeed to address generational renewal. I already mentioned that there are a few. A few sort of support mechanisms under the policy which are catered for generational renewal. What is important to highlight is that the cap alone will not make the difference. So generational renewal depends a lot on everything outside of agriculture. So we still have the average agricultural income at 50% of the average of the global economy, despite the perceived big sort of level of subsidies under the cap. So you need to make the sector attractive. You need to have, let's say, a viable income solutions. That also depends on rural development. It also depends on what other opportunities the employed have in other parts of the economy, etc. So the cap tries, but it's again, like everything else, it's more complex. I think the 2020 census that was published end of last year showed that the average age of farmers is increasing. It was 57 years old. Whether that's bad or not, I mean, it also depends a lot on the let's say ownership structure and also in terms of inheritance law, etc. So I think the average age, it is an indicator, but I would not definitely think it's super bad. We have mature, bold farmers, but the problem is that only 11% of farms are below 40. So there is quite a big gap of the two. So this is something where we indeed should be able to improve, and hopefully we will. And in terms of skills, if I remember correctly, this year is the year of European skills in Europe. So hopefully there will be a lot of initiatives to boost vocational training under the CAP. Again, we have a lot of opportunities under ACIS, also to share knowledge. This is also a very important part of the policy, because besides research, you need to share the knowledge. So we have, again, depending on how the member states they use the opportunity, we have, let's say, the framework to do so. I also talked a lot, but not as much as Alexander, and I'm going to steal your closing words, because I'm going to say, Viva le lait. This is how Alexander closes his emails all the time.
Thank you very much, Bence. I would like to tap on one of the things you mentioned, that is the greenhouse gas reduction coming from the dairy sector. And now there is, and this is also reflecting some of the questions that I individually received from some participants, that there's this idea of net zero farming, right? Which means the breeding of lower, one of the means is the breeding of lower methane cows. Now, on one hand, this question is targeted to you, Alexander. That so, what would, in your opinion, farmers and processors also need in order to help achieve the idea of net zero farming from a pragmatic point of view, right? And then to Bence is, how is the Commission evaluating the options? What are you actually doing? Because the question that I received concerns the problem of how to reach the objectives of 30%, if I'm not mistaken, reduction of methane emissions. So that's not an easy thing to do from an animal breeding perspective, from a almost animal feedstuff perspective. And the other, and again for processors, I think you got questions. Could you, whoever wants to start?
I'm glad to start, because I'm going to leave the difficult part to Alexander. So for the moment, without the Green Deal, which is in progress, the agriculture policy itself, it has a number of greening type environmental instruments. So to start from what we call baseline, we have something called conditionality. Conditionality refers to these good agro-environmental conditions and statutory management requirements. Basically, these relate to legislation outside of agriculture, so environmental, climate, animal welfare, etc., which are compulsory for farmers to carry out if they want to receive direct payments. So basically, this covers 90% of EU agricultural area. So basically, it caters for partly for climate-related objectives. The second step is what we call the enhanced eco schemes. This is under the new common agricultural policy now. So you have, like I said, 25% of direct payments have to be provided if certain quality, environmental, etc. quality criteria are fulfilled, and 35%, if I remember correctly, of the second pillar rural development payments need to go to climate, environment, etc. objectives. So this is what the CAP does now. With the Green Deal, this will change depending on the outcome, of course. But if you look at the proposals for the moment, and this is where it becomes tricky, individually, I mean, they put a bit of a burden on the sector individually, some a bit more, some a bit less. But when you add them all up, it becomes quite something. So this is going to be interesting to see what comes out in the end of all these proposals. What we need to avoid is to basically just put burden and even more conditions on farmers. If they have to comply with conditions, they need to be incentivized. So this is something where and this is basically what is happening now in the European Parliament, is that there is a fear, and I think it's a valid one, that farmers are perceived, which was mentioned, as basically not that they are harming the environment, harmful to the let's say the natural habitat in where we live, and it leads a bit to an alienation of farmers when it comes to their, let's say, attitude towards Brussels, as it is termed somehow. So this is something where we need to be super cautious that we do not alienate the sector. We involve them, include them, listen to them.
How do you involve them? Well, what's the pragmatic way to involve farmers who basically want to farm?
It's very simple. It's very simple. So basically, if we want to put out a legislative proposal, it has to be subject to an impact assessment first. And as part of the impact assessment, we have public consultation, a mandatory one, where we consult stakeholders, including the public. So everybody has the opportunity as an individual to contribute, and also through stakeholder groups, organizations. I suppose EDA is also contributing to very loudly to some of the proposals. That's how the let's say the sector's voice is included. So this is a must.
So it's being asked for, but it's not. You're not going to local level.
It's logistically it's impossible to do that. So the way this goes is we have an online consultation, but of course we reach out. We reach out and we try to spread the word because for us it's very important. The more contributions we have, the better, let's say, our understanding on the challenges, also understanding of preferred options. So this is something that I mean, sometimes we get a limited number of, depending on the proposal. Usually when there's a cap reform, we have reforms all the time. So when there's a proposal to amend the agricultural policy, we have a lot of contributions. So I think it's quite representative. And of course, we also need to screen out basically, I forgot the term, but those contributions which are repetitive and not gibberish, not necessarily gibberish, but basically we would call campaigns.
Propaganda.
That there's an organization who mobilizes their people and then they send the same reply. So, but anyway, even without, when we filter for that, for the cap reform, also for the school scheme, we had a consultation last year, I think, and received quite a lot. So there are some more attractive, less attractive proposals. But
Alexander, what do you think?
And just one, if I may, sorry, one thing which is very important. It's one thing that what the policy can provide for the change. It's also very important, and I didn't really touch upon the consumer, which is super important. And on labeling, I just want to say that it's very important that what we do in terms of policy proposals on labeling is basically to inform the consumer, not to manipulate the consumer. There's a thin line. So here, that's very important that whatever proposal comes out, it reflects this. So basically what I wanted to say, the last thing, and then the hot potato to Alexander, is that what is important is that you also have initiatives by the sector. And we have good examples. I'm aware of Arla, who have launched an environment or sustainability incentive program. So I think it's very important that things are not coming only top down, but change is happening from ground up as well. So I think it's a symbiosis of the two where we can find, say, the nice way forward. Alexander.
Yeah, because you mentioned it, I'll start off with agri-food, the Danish cooperative active in 6 countries in Europe. Indeed, what they do, they incentivize. They have a program, 100 boxes to tick for environmental sustainability points. And as soon as you tick, you get a higher milk price. It's not a fortune at the end of the day, but you get that you're incentivized to take steps. That's the first point. So thank you for mentioning that. Next point, hors sujet, as they say. transparency in the European policy making. It's a pity that that is not more widely known. I had the pleasure to 1 year in the European Commission services. The level of transparency in the policy making at European Union level, at least in the Commission, is exemplary. I'm not talking about Hungary, I'm talking about all member states. We will not find that way of transparency. Why that? Because they need it. Because Bence and his team, they don't know the reality all over. They can't. So they need the input from the stakeholders, people, etc. That's good. On the methane, I don't want the hot potato. For the methane emissions, yes, we will not make dairy without cows, and we are proud of the cows. Look at Hungary. When you joined the European Union, you had 310,000 dairy cows. Today, you have 210, have 1/3 less. In 2004, average production 5.7 tons per cow. Now it's close to 10. You're a leader. You're in the leading edge here. So productivity, is that what you mentioned? And that means 100,000 dairy cows less in Hungary means less methane emissions. Now on methane, there is a scientific, in the meantime, there's a scientific consensus when the methane, first of all, is an extremely powerful greenhouse gas. No doubt about it, no doubt. But when the CO2 equivalence was calculated back at the Kyoto Protocol in 1995, I didn't have a smartphone, I didn't have all the knowledge we have today. Today, it's common sense in science. In 95, they said, well, methane we calculate on 100 years activity for warming potential. So that's what we are finding, warming potential. And it was calculated, the CO2 equivalent of methane was calculated on 100 years time of active global warming. In the meantime, we know methane has 12 years of active time. So that would already, if you would get that into the legislation, that would already change the look. But that's not what we want. We don't want to change the look. We want to have net zero agriculture farming. And what Allah did in 2019, nobody waited for the Green Deal. They announced in March 2019 their avenue for zero net dairy in 2050. Value went to 2035. They all have a strategy in place, and they would have loved to concentrate, focus on implementing the strategy with their farmers and not using now the energy, time, money to comply with European needs. That is the critics made also from the other side of the ground of the United States towards our approach to sustainability. Another point on methane, it's circular. In the dairy, the methane is circular. The cow is emitting methane, 12 to 14 years active as a global warming molecule. But that methane is then circular, integrated into the grass, which is a pasture, which is again eaten by the cow. So there is a circularity. You only add methane in the dairy sector if you increase your dairy herds. That didn't happen in Europe for the last 20 years. We go down and down and down. We're now at 90 million dairy herds. So as long as you don't increase your dairy herd, there is no increased global warming by methane. That's scientific consensus. And that's important. And now on the methane reduction, further reduction, yes. By the way, there's not only methane, there are other gases. So you would have it be global warming neutral for dairy. You would have to reduce your dairy herd by 0.3%. That's what we easily do in Europe. Not all over the world, but in Europe we do that easily. And then you can reduce the methane emissions per dairy cow by the most common technology right now is feed additives. In large scale, they work 12, 16%. They're working on the next generation. They promise 2025, but in real life, it's 12 to 16. They are working on the next generation. They promise 30, 35%, so we'll see in real life maybe 20%, 25%. And there is a limit. You can't have a dairy cow. You can't have a dairy cow without methane. That is a biological process. That's the beauty of the dairy cow, making out of roughage the most nutritional food stuff you can get: milk, cheese, yogurt, whatever. So that is the point on the methane thing. And believe me, the industry leaders in the processing side and at farm level, we have the young farmer that really good. We had the Agri Council with your boss in January last year at Alexis Losser's farm in Alsace. I've been there. France Agri-Carbon, the project, and he was really, I mean, that's a 30-year-old dairy farmer that was proud to show to all the European agricultural ministers. I don't know, you were there, Mr. Butcher was there, your boss was there, MEPs were there, the commissioner was there, and he was so proud to show what he does on his farm every day, right? And he's incentivized by his dairy company, Alsace for that. That's the way to go, with all my respect, and you will get that.
By the way, there's ongoing research that I know concerning the feed stuff.
Yeah.
That feeds into the reduction of for cows. That's an area where companies in Hungary I know are very active. So that can help eventually achieving the net zero. Now we are pretty much over time, I guess. There's consensus on that. It's not your fault. But I think we had a very interesting discussion. Now, I would like to, just one question. We have received many questions. I tried to sort of ask you a sum or a succinct version of the question. Ethan was one of those. And each one of you, I have one question and again, a couple of sentences because time limits that we had promised to all those participating, mine as well. I hope they enjoyed the discussion that we had. And of course, we could go on for another hour, which would be very interesting. And I would have liked to ask people actually in the audience, but that will be reserved for the networking part after. Some very specific questions on Hungarian initiatives and maybe how they contribute to the recent CAT plans and a couple of the topics that we've mentioned. But the first question is to David. Where do you see the future of the study? And I know we didn't discuss this in advance, so I do ask you to think from a research perspective. Do you see that, Bence had mentioned that this looks back, right? So this has a situational bias or time bias. Do you see that it would be worth re-executing the study, maybe taking points from both of the panel members within the next 6 months, next 12 months, 2 years? What would be the time frame in your view that would make a significant contributions to the reforming of the post-2027 CAP or the reforming, the changing of the national CAP plan?
Well, okay, thank you very much for your question. It's a really interesting question. Of course, time series data is especially valuable. So if you do another data, it's always the best. So yeah, I think the proper time for doing another survey like this is in the next 2 years, because there is a crisis, aftermath of the crisis. So usually these ongoing surveys like the National Social Survey, etc., it's in 2 years. And I think it's a proper time. On the other hand, I think it's really interesting to explore the imaginaries in the citizen mind about the dairy. As Anton said, I think it's a really interesting way about the imaginaries on the dairy products. For example, cheese. Everybody in their mind, the cheese, like France, wine and free time near the seashore. So it's really, really strong imaginary in every citizen mind. But about the dairy production, there isn't any clear or vivid imaginary mind of the citizens. If you ask somebody about the dairy production, dairy processing, they believe they are some cowboys from overseas and so on. And of course, the reality.
Some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are. But of course, the dairy sector is one of the most high-tech sector in the world field. So I think these imaginaries is really important, and it can help on the human research problem as well. Because you see an imaginary which is lovely for you. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bence. What is the next most important deliverable before the end of the legislative cycle, that you are sure that your commissioner can deliver on? What's the next policy item? No, nobody listens to this. So.
No, everybody can listen. And the thing is, you're not putting me in a difficult position because what my commissioner can put forward is governed by the annual work program. So basically, we have just very few initiatives from DG Agri, which are still in the pipeline, and
they are going to be delivered.
Yeah. School scheme for one. Review that's I think marketing standards, promotion. So basically you couldn't catch me there. I'm sorry to say.
Okay. Well, we are confident that you are confident. Thank you. And Alexander, you've touched upon many issues and methods, and from your organization's point of view, where do you think that that such studies, such research, in which area of the dairy segment of the agriculture, right, would be most welcome from coming from that part of it? You mentioned that Hungary is a black box to you. I've
seen studies. I can't talk about it because I'm in a study of a huge input company to agriculture and dairy, and they made right now their point of 2030, right? I can't tell you the name of the company, but they have spotted that there is a clear thinking that, well, there are parts of old Europe where the density of livestock will go down. The density of dairy will go down, and livestock will go down. And where will the milk come from? And there is a clear tendency to think that there is still untapped potential for livestock and dairy production in what in the old days we called the new member states, and especially Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, which when God created the world, the countries were made from milk. And so that is the thinking. So there is, you see that, and you mentioned the dynamics in Hungary, which are not yet really at full scale, full speed, but they are there. And there is a clear thinking that 2030, the Eastern countries, which, as you alluded to, will be a driving force if we want, as Europe, stay a dairy superpower, which we are.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank you generally for your contributions. We really appreciated that. Thank you very much for those who have come and joined us, and all those who followed our discussion online. Again, as I mentioned, the discussion will be available. The presentation also will be available on the website of Századvég. And with that, once again, thank you very much. And till the next time we have the policy discussion. As they said, I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks for